Yeah, good. Let's do it. Let's do it for like 2030. Is this Andreas 4000 coming up with these goddamn creative questions? I started out as Grant's corporate lead captain, and now I actually help Grant run Cardone Capital. So what I do is I focus on the operations, the day-to-day, and then also back Grant up as far as the acquisitions, finding the debt for these properties. But what we do is we go out and we buy these large multifamily complexes, and we become the leading crowdfunder, not just platform, but real estate company in the world. And so what we do is we go and buy multifamily apartments in great locations, great quality assets. And then Grant has close to 20 million followers on social media, and we actually pair the two together, and we run that whole thing. So we run the operation, we run the real estate, and these investors are actually coming in and partnering with us on that real estate, where they get the benefits of owning real estate. They just don't have to deal with the three T's: the tenants, the toilets, and the termites. I came from a very corporate setting, United Express to entrepreneur. For me, there wasn't. It's much faster pace, but there's also a lot of randomity, I like to call it. So you're not doing the same thing every day. Or when I flew for the airline, it was like, okay, you knew what to expect. With Grant, you just don't know what to expect. I mean, I literally was flying the airplane to landing in. For example, like Panama City Beach, we would go and look at, 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 units in one day. We would go eat something, get back on the airplane, fly to Miami. So my life, I really had to do this adjustment. But that's actually what I was looking for. I get really bored when I know what I'm going to do that day. With Grant, you just don't know. Well, going back to making these big life changes in decisions, right? When I was 30 years old, I made a huge decision that I wanted to do something like, what's new, what's next? I gave up my career as a commercial airline pilot to be around somebody larger than life, a huge entrepreneur, Grant Cardone, because I knew that if I didn't, I was gonna have regrets. And I always say this, look, if people are watching right now and they wanna make that move, you wanna make that move. Like, you feel it, like you wanna make that move, so just do it. Because I always look at this, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario for me was I could actually go back to work at the airlines. And so you got to take that, what some people call it risk. I didn't call it risk. When I did a lot of homework on Grant. Like, I actually studied him and read his books, and I felt like I knew who Grant was before I even came to work for Grant. And I think that's important for people who are making those decisions. I don't recommend making blind decisions where it's like, oh, I'm going to give up my career to go and do something. No, go and work with somebody who has something bigger and greater and really what you want, so that way you could add value to them and their team, so that way you guys can grow together as a team to create something a lot bigger than what you currently have. For me, I actually wanted to position myself to do real estate full time. When I was 16 years old, believe it or not, I wanted to buy my first house. And my uncle looked at me and he's like, son, you don't have any money. Like, you don't have any money. Like you don't have a down payment. And so I actually became a pilot to get money to go and buy real estate. And so people think like, oh, it's kind of a coincidence that you went to go work for Grant and now you're in the real estate department. It has always been my vision to be in real estate full time. So when he asked me, hey, look, you're worth more in, Cardone Capital than you are in the flight deck, it was actually a huge accomplishment for me, because I felt like, man, the stuff that we're working on and the portfolio had gotten big enough where I can dedicate 100% of my time to Cardone Capital, to the real estate, because that has always been my true passion. Don't get me wrong, I still like flying jets, I still like flying airplanes, but when you fly airplanes, like I have 10,000 hours, when you fly airplanes that much, there's only so much you can do. The takeoff and landings are a lot of fun, but when you get up at cruise altitude, you're literally just checking in on the radio and you're doing other stuff. Like, you're still doing something, but when you have these long trips that are 5 hours, 6 hours, you read a lot of books, you're hanging out with the crew a lot of the time. And so there's a lot of dead time, especially when you go on these trips. So for me, it's about being efficient, about being proficient. And so where I am right now is really what I've achieved, or what I've wanted to achieve for a long time. Actually, there's one tip. The main tip is get around somebody who's already doing what you want to do. So like if you want to do fix and flips, get around the person who's the best at fix and flips. If you want to do multifamily, get around Cardone and Ryan and people who are doing multifamily. If you want to get around retail or whatever real estate you want to get, if you can get around somebody who's already doing it, I promise you, you will fast track. People are like, oh, well, what's the shortcut? This is a shortcut. There's not going to be a shortcut in the sense that you're not going to have to put in work, but you're actually going to be doing the work that pays the biggest yield, the biggest return, because they're going to have access to deals. The biggest thing in real estate, the hardest thing is to actually find a great deal. So what I mean is, like, if you can get around people who already know how to identify a good deal, you now are being trained to find good deals. I mean, I started out by just reading books, right? I mean, there's really the 4 or 5 main types of real estate. I prefer, and I always recommend multifamily real estate to anybody who's starting out or anybody who wants to do this long-term investment. You know, when you look at the different classes, you've got office, which is really capital intensive and it's really bigger, like it's harder to do. You've got land. I don't think land is great for starting, and also, you know, it's specialized because land doesn't have the big cash flow. The other piece is, you know, what is it? Retail. I mean, retail is very money intense, and it's just a different operations. And multifamily, I really like it because, say you have 200 units, right? If 20 people move out, you're still 90% occupied, and you can go and tweak those units and spend very little money to get them ready again. In those other types of real estate, you have to have more money. So I always say multifamily, whether it's 20 units or 30 units or 40 units or 50 units, it's a great way to start because it gives you more flexibility in capital, and also in managing it to where you're successful. A lot of those other ones, it's harder to be successful because there's a lot more curveballs. Multifamily is really, I call it dummy proof. You know, multifamily, if you look at it from a standpoint of just being very simple, you collect rents on the 1st and you pay out your investors on the 15th. And you have, okay, here's the property, here's the equity, here's the debt, and you hold it for a long enough period of time, eventually the property is going to be worth more. With these other ones, there's just a lot more moving pieces to it. Well, I think all of us monkey see, monkey do. If you have a monkey see, monkey do attitude and philosophy, it's just a lot. It's just a lot easier to grip into, you know, like I read a lot of books. Like I read a lot of books and they confused the hell out of me because I was like, oh, well, should I do this or should I do this? Should I do this or should I do this? When you get around somebody who's actually doing it, it actually keeps you in line into like, hey, actually doing a deal. The hardest thing in real estate is actually doing your first deal and then being successful in your first deal. So you literally have to get around somebody who is successful so that way success breeds success. In real estate, people are like, oh, it's super easy, There's a lot of gotchas in real estate. Like we have a real estate club, for example, right? The questions and the deals and the stuff that we see on a weekly basis, there's actually more deals that we say no to than we actually say yes to. That is actually a win. Believe it or not, that is actually a success. To say no to a shitty deal and have a mentor say, Ryan, you don't want to do this deal because of X, Y, and Z, the location, the numbers in place aren't really real, the debt's gonna be terrible, this is why this thing doesn't work, or cash flow, or doesn't make sense. Like you have to get around real experience in order to experience that. It's cool, I have this, so when I was a captain, I was flying a CRJ 700, it was 70 passengers. And I was flying from St. Louis, Missouri to Denver, Colorado. And I was actually reaching 21,000 feet. I'll remember this day forever. I was reaching 21,000 feet, I was climbing to 35. And what happened was all my pressurization systems were shutting down in the airplane. This is crazy, this is bananas. This is like, you don't want this, right? Because what happens is when your pressurization shuts down in the airplane, the mask will eventually drop, meaning the mask will drop, people have to put on, it's very scary. And so what happened was, I immediately leveled off and we declared an emergency. The person on the other line said, well, hey, you got somebody below you, you need to wait. And I immediately picked up the radio and I said, we're not waiting, I'm descending to 10,000 feet right now, declaring emergency, we have pressurization. And I did that, right? And this was a huge deal as a captain, as a person, in control of, 75 people's lives. You wanna make sure you're making the right decisions. I turned the bus around, I turned the airplane around, I went and landed in St. Louis, and I'll never forget this. I called my chief pilot and I told him, I said, look, I just had this experience. this is what happened. And he says, Ryan, number one, you know what makes experienced pilots? And I said, no, what? Experiences. And so those experiences that I went through in my life in aviation and also in real estate really translate, because the more experiences you have and the more experience you're involved with, the better you can make decisions in the future. So that way you're prepared because you have the tools and the checklist and everything that you need to be successful. I think that, for me and also for Grant, I think the industry has been, purely dominated by, whether it's guys and people who have really locked in and understand real estate, because there's a lot of benefits to it. But if I had a magic wand and I could change anything in the real estate game, I would actually want it to be where other people were playing at a bigger level in the real estate game, and they were changing the communities. I think a lot of times in real estate, there's like the top 5 groups. You look at, BlackRock, you look at Blackstone, you look at Starwood, you look at MAA, like there's these groups that control these pieces of real estate. I wish that other people, and I think Cardone Capital is a pathfinder in that way, where other people will realize, okay, partnerships are actually the way to do real estate on a bigger scale, on a much bigger scale, and that they could actually go and change the way their community is investing. For so long, whether you're going to work at United or you're going to work in a company, your options are to invest as a 401k, and that's really it. Some people do, stocks and bonds, but nobody really has that vehicle where you can invest in a real asset in real estate and be a partner. So I think that, this magic wand is currently happening right now, but I think that other people in the population, they just need to understand the value of real estate and start investing in it. I'd actually probably pick Port Royale. So here's why. So Port Royale is 500 plus units and it sits on the water. So I definitely like a good view, right? It sits on the water, it's got a great view. Port Royale also needs work, like we all do, right? Like when I get into a situation and a scene in an environment and in a partnership, I always want to get better. So I look at these properties like, yeah, it's really a Class A and it's in a Class A location, because location is very important when it comes to real estate, but I'm always working on myself. So I see as Port Royale, like there's that little extra thing each day. There's that little extra thing each year that you can improve it. And then the last thing is probably Port Royale is surrounded by some of the biggest and the best properties, and also very high value pieces of real estate. So I like to think of myself as like, look, I don't need to be the smartest person. I want to be a great asset surrounded by a bunch of other great assets. Well, there's a lot of moving pieces on these assets because they're big, right? There's, you got the asset, then you've got the debt, and then you've got the marketplace, and then you've got due diligence, like what you find, and then you've got the closing, and then you've got the management. I think discipline is very important in anything you're doing in life, because you have to stay involved. Like you literally have to stay involved with the seller, with the broker, with your team. It's typically in these big deals, it's 30 days due diligence, 30 days close, potentially extensions, right? So your persistence and dedication and discipline, it's like, this isn't closing in a week, in 7 days. This is 60, 90, 120 days just for one deal. A lot goes in. I mean, we have folders. We have folders in the office for due diligence. A lot of it's converting to electronic, but there's huge folders of due diligence for each deal. It's massive. You're literally buying 320 units or 300 units in one purchase. So it's like going out and buying 300 houses at one time. Team. Yep. The secret to raising $1 billion is the team. So if you don't have a team, I don't think you're ever going to raise $1 billion. Grant has 16 plus million followers on Instagram, but the one thing that we have always done is, okay, here's Grant, here's the team. How do we build the team to make sure that the investors feel like they're a part of something, not just hitting a website, not just, blind investing. They could actually call into somebody and talk to somebody and say, hey, look, I've got $450,000 in my IRA. I've got $25K in cash. I've got, $1 million in this. Like people, I truly believe people want to talk to somebody in order to make big investments. And we've done a really great job at that. I mean, here at Cardone Capital, we have 30 people who work in the office every single day. And myself and Andreas and Jake and the whole team, we've done a great job at building out the investor relations team where people actually feel like I'm not just sending my money, I can actually call and talk with somebody, which has been huge. I mean, all of our other competitors, it's literally they want to build the best website, the prettiest website, X, Y, and Z, so people are going to be like automated. I just don't believe in the automation. I believe in people and I believe in teams. When I first started working for Grant, he actually would go through these different real estate jargons and terms. The biggest one is NOI, net operating income. And I used to think that I really understood NOI until I started working for Grant. And when he started doing, well, hey, what's your exit price and what's your debt and what's your going in cap rate, like all these different things that the NOI has control of, I was like, like I was kind of stumbling, right? I knew what it was. It's income less expenses equals NOI. I always say you live and die by the NOI, which is your net operating income. That's what real estate is based, the value is based off the NOI. But you truly need to understand, okay, that's the simple form, so that's the simple breakdown, but you also need to hang out with people who are challenging you to say, okay, do you really understand it? Because if you don't understand the numbers, then you don't understand a good deal. And if you don't understand a good deal, you don't understand debt. And if you don't understand debt, then you really can't go out there and raise money, get money from investors, and have the confidence to go and buy multiple deals and grow and scale. You got to look at so many deals. I mean, you know, no matter what you're investing in, if you're not looking at 10, 20, 30, 40 deals, I mean, I'll look sometimes at 20, 30, 40 deals a day, depending on the market, depending on how many deals are out there. But I'm looking at deals not just to buy them, but to compare against the other one. When you look at 20 deals, you can identify the one deal that makes money, that actually has cash flow, because you want to look at the 20 deals. What's the location? Who's the seller? Why are they selling? The big question right now is, why are people selling in today's market? In today's market, you should not be a seller. You should actually be a buyer. I really pride myself off of, you know, like if I'm Ryan and I'm surrounded by a bunch of other, like if I'm the best person in the block or in the room, I'm in the wrong room. I'm in the wrong pond. So I've always tried to achieve, and even going back to the earlier question, is like, you know, at 30 years old, when I decided to go and change it up again, because I actually became the biggest fish, one of the biggest fish. I was surrounded by great mentors in the pond. I now wanted to start over and be a small fish in a much bigger pond, because I knew the growth factor was going to be 20x. I actually don't go to work to earn. I go to work to learn. And if I learn something each and every day, I'm going to earn. But that's a huge mental shift, and a big piece that Grant has actually taught me in my life is these, like, hey, look, you're going to be underpaid for a very long time until one day you will be overpaid. That's one of the greatest lessons Grant's ever taught me. He's like, look, put in the time now, put in the time now. And yeah, he's a grinder. And I told Andres this the other day. I was driving with Grant one day in Houston, Texas, and he was grinding on me for something. It was like, you know, the address or the property or the spreadsheet or something wasn't what we wanted it to be. And I looked at him, I was like, you know what, man? I was like, I'm never going to expect to win small with you, because I'm not going to win small. Like, I'm not going to win small working with you, but I do expect to win big with you. And this is why. Because the way you grind, what you expect is like massive. And so we went and bought, you know, we went and bought Woodway Square, we went and bought the 2 deals in the Heights, we went and bought Sugarland. We literally bought 4 deals there in Houston, because he is such a grinder, he is so persistent, he knows what he wants as far as good quality assets. And so again, it goes back to, like, you're probably not gonna win small with Grant, but you will win big. How long does it take you to do your hair in the morning? Who put this in there?
Everyone wants to know that one.
But who put this in there? Was that Andreas? Or was that Grant? Good old curveballs. I think that's good for today. Let's just see what we got. Let's see what we got, man.